How's everybody doing? Do you like Dora? When I was 6 years old, my dad loaded me into our family van, and he had removed the seats, which I had never seen before. And so I sat in the van. There was another man named Don Green, and he was with us. And so Dad and Don sat in the front, and then they sat me on the floor in the middle between the two. You can't do that now, but it was a different time then, and you could do that. And I sat there, and it was confusing to me why Dad had taken the seats out. And Dawn and my father began to talk. And I was too young to understand what they were saying. I was too young to understand the meaning of their words, but I was certainly old enough to understand and to capture the tone of their voice. And at 6 years old, I knew that whatever it was that we were doing, it was very important. It was more important than most other things, and it was the sort of thing that we were going to go do no matter what. We weren't going to let anything stop us. And so it was with a certain level of determination that our van traveled through the city and outside of the city and into the country, and I never understood what it was that we were doing, but inside of me grew this urgency that I was going to take part in something that was really big, that was really important. And I remember sitting on the floor and wondering what this was. We drove outside of the city. We drove for quite a long time, and we ended up at a house in the country. And when we pulled in, there were some other trucks that were there, and there were some men standing around those trucks, and I recognized the men. And we got out, and there was a woman standing there. And she came, and she spoke to my father and to Dawn. And then she climbed in her car and drove away. And the men walked into the house, and they began to box up certain items and carry them out and put them in the truck and into the van. I did not understand some of the words that I was hearing. I didn't understand the words spousal abuse. I didn't understand the words separation or divorce. I didn't understand those things. But at 6 years old, what I did understand was that something was going on. And it was important. And I was part of it. So I got busy doing what I could do. I would open the doors when they needed to be open. And the rest of the time I built cardboard boxes. And we loaded all the stuff into the vehicles and we drove away. And went to an apartment and unloaded the stuff. And then I went home with my dad in our empty van to the house. And I went to bed not understanding what had happened, but deeply satisfied and deeply gratified that I had done something that mattered for some reason. As a child, I was comfortable with the idea that I didn't understand something. I didn't need to understand it. I just knew that what I was doing mattered. Now, if you fast forward a bunch of years, the worst job I ever had, ever, by a large margin, was a job where I sat on a couch from 4 in the afternoon to 11:30 at night. That's the job. I sat there so that someone could put a check mark on a page saying that there was a person present at such and such a place at such and such a time. And I sat there. The paycheck came every week. The paycheck was not enough. And I didn't think it could be enough because the more I sat there, the more I understood that what I was doing had no significance. It didn't do anything. I knew that when I resigned, no one would replace me. Likely they would keep putting the check mark in the box that said that someone was there, even though no one was. And I sat there. I watched TV. I checked Facebook. Have you ever been checking Facebook and then you shut it off and then immediately turn it back on again? I did that. I read everything. I just did nothing. Worst job I ever had. And the reason that it was the worst job is because I knew in my soul that it had no significance whatsoever. There was nothing redeeming about it. I didn't do anything. If I ceased to exist, nothing in the world would change. I can put up with a lot of nasty stuff. I can put up with boredom. I can put up with not being paid enough. I can put up with a lot of stuff so long as I know that what I'm doing in some way, shape, or form matters to someone somewhere. I'm moving the needle. I'm pulling the rope. Whatever it is, something changes for something. If that happens, there's a satisfaction inside of me that is nourishing. But if it doesn't happen, it gets to the place where I don't care how much the paycheck is. I just can't go on any further. The movie that we're talking about today is The Incredibles. By a show of hands, who has seen The Incredibles? Who thinks that's a great animated movie? This is probably my favorite animated movie. This is one that I really like, and it's not only because I feel a bit like a superhero with my super abilities and the super physique and not just because of that. But there's something about the movie that speaks to me. The Incredibles is the name of a family, and Mr. Incredible is dad, Elastigirl is mom. And Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl are always at the front of some terrible thing that's about to happen. That terrible thing encounters them first, and they stop that terrible thing from happening, and this makes them superheroes. Mr. Incredible is tremendously strong. Elastigirl can stretch and twist, and she can go around corners and all kinds of stuff. And they find themselves in situations where the only thing that will solve the situation is to have a woman who can turn herself into something else, or to have a guy who can lift up a locomotive off someone, or something like that. But as the world goes on, they find that the world doesn't need superheroes quite as much as they used to. And so the need for these guys dwindles and dwindles until they find themselves having to get a job, just a normal job. And this job is so much less satisfying because their purpose is to be super. Their purpose is to accomplish these tasks that just can't be accomplished, yet they do it just in the nick of time. And now that's taken away from them. And then there's a boy, and this boy idolizes Mr. Incredible. And he jumps in the car, and he wants to be like Mr. Incredible. And Mr. Incredible doesn't have time for him. Did you see the ejection seat? Poof, out the side of the car. Mr. Incredible works alone. And now, Mr. Incredible finds himself very much alone, where nobody needs what he can do. I want to transition to an idea, and we're going to come back to the Incredibles movie here in a moment, but I want to unpack an idea for you. Each person has a purpose. God created us, each person with a purpose, and we actually have the same purpose. Each person in this room, each person in this world that has ever been, has the purpose of worshiping God. The question of what is the meaning of life? The answer to that is to worship God. Now, there are a lot of different ways that we worship God, but for those who know, worshiping God is simply the most satisfying, fulfilling thing that can possibly be ever in the world. No matter what, this is it. This is the most satisfying thing, to worship God. And there is nothing more satisfying within worshiping God than taking someone who doesn't know who God is and guiding them and loving them into a place where they see who God is. We would say a person who isn't a Christian, teaching them and loving them and having a relationship with them until through you they hear God's voice and they can't deny who God is any longer, and they say, I believe who God is, I confess that with my mouth, and I believe that in my mind. For those who know, that is the most satisfying thing in the world. That's it. There is nothing like it. This is why you have people who are willing to come to the church and do any task, anything at all, just so long as that they can be part of something that is showing people who God is. See, that's the second part of this. The purpose of the church mirrors the purpose of humanity. The purpose of church is to worship God because we are the church and we are given this task. This is our purpose. And this works really well. This is something that works smoothly. And every church has no problem gaining volunteers. And every church has no problems putting on a new event. There's no snickering out here. I'm not doing a good job with this joke. Let me try another run at this. Sometimes it is really difficult to get people to take part in what they are created to do. I understand that. The point of the church is to be a place that heals. You can take that as a metaphor, or you can take that literally. The metaphor is that people come to the church not knowing who God is. They come broken. And through their experience of the church and the experience of the people in the church, they are guided towards knowing who Christ is, therefore being healed. And the church heals in that way. There is also a very literal meaning to that. The church heals. By a raise of hands, who has been healed by the Holy Spirit in their life? Look around. Hold your hand up high. This is part of your testimony. In this room right now, there are people who have been healed in this past year, in this past month, in this past week. The Holy Spirit heals. And we experience this. And so there is the metaphor of healing, and there is also the literal understanding of healing. And both of these things take place in this church. And those things are part of worship, which is the reason for our existence. It's the most gratifying thing that there is. I need to now enter into something I want to communicate this clearly, and I want to communicate this gently. There are people in this room who throughout their life have tried to get involved in what a church is doing. They've tried to get involved in a particular program. Maybe they've signed their name on a piece of paper when we've asked for volunteers, or another church has asked for volunteers. And there's been no response. You haven't heard back. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but none of them help you fulfill what you were created to do. If you've been hurt by this, if it's been me that's done this, if it's been someone at this church that's done this, I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize. To say that's not right. You wanted to be involved in what the church is doing and what God is doing. You wanted to be part of fulfilling your purpose, of worshiping God, telling people in some way, shape, or form about God. And when you asked to be part of that, the answer was either silent or no. I apologize for that. If that has happened at another church, if that has happened in another time, then as a representative of a pastoral team, as a person who works at the church, I would like to apologize for that as well. That's not okay. I'm sorry. We'll try to do better. We'll work to do better. So now, what will you do? How will you fulfill your purpose? Something that happens is people ask to be involved, and they get no response. And they ask to be involved and they get no response. And they ask to be involved and they get no response. And ultimately get to the place where they're not going to ask to be involved anymore. Which I understand why, but the problem with that is you're turning away from the reason you were created, and you are turning away from the most satisfying event you can ever take part in. We're going to watch another bit of a movie clip here. I'll get you to look up at the screens.
You'll get over it. I seem to recall you prefer to work alone.
Release me! Now!
Or what?
I'll crush her.
Oh, that sounds a little dark for you. Now, go ahead.
It'll be easy, like breaking a toothpick.
Show me. I knew you couldn't do it, even when you have nothing to lose. You're weak! And I've outgrown you.
If you have your brown Bibles, I invite you to open them to page 506. That's Ecclesiastes. We're going to be looking at chapter 4. I'm going to start at verse 7. There are two parts to what I'm about to read, and it sounds like they're disconnected, but let's listen. Let's see how these connect. I observed yet another example of something meaningless under the sun. This is a case of a man who is all alone, without child or brother, yet who works hard to gain as much wealth as he can. But then he asks himself, who am I working for? Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It's all so meaningless and depressing. This is when nothing you're doing is fulfilling. Here's the second part. Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? My wife laughed at that when I read that. A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. So what do these two things have to do with each other? In the context of a church, there are different programs that are put on. It might be kids ministry, it might be youth ministry, it might be a Sunday morning service worship team or tech team. There are different programs that are put on, and as they are put on, there are different people who get involved, and there are different people who become key in those ministries. These ministries do not exist in order to give you something to do. The ministries don't exist so that there is a way for people to become comfortable here. These ministries exist to help provide a way for you to fill out your purpose, for you to fulfill your purpose. See, the church's purpose and our purpose are the same purpose, but we pull away from these purposes. We pull away from these opportunities for a number of different reasons. And whatever reason exists for you, these are the things that keep you from your purpose. But those who know, those who have experienced what it's like to have someone know who God is, to become a Christian, to confess with their mouth and believe in their mind, to begin to hear the words of God and hear the tone of God and see their world forever changed. And the Bible goes from being a place to read and understand more. It goes from there to becoming a book that helps us shape our life. For those people who have experienced that and the people that will know, they will come and they will be part of anything. Whatever is going on, I'm part of it. I will unlock doors. I will vacuum floors. I will set up communion. I will do anything. Just let me be part of what's going on, because it is the most satisfying, deeply fulfilling thing that I can ever be part of. But we can't do this alone. We can't do this effectively alone. And this is why we bring together groups of people, so that together we can move forward and we can fulfill God's purpose. We are better together than we are alone. I'll get you to flip over a couple of books to Hebrews. This is on page 926. This is a verse that has been very challenging to me throughout my life. So it's Hebrews 10, verse 25, and it says this: "And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near." So maybe you've asked to be part of something, and maybe the answer has come back no. And it's happened so often that you begin to think, I think I might just leave that church. As a matter of fact, I think I might leave church altogether. Why do we need to go to church anyway? It doesn't change what I believe. Let me ask a question. If we were talking about animals, who does the predator always go after? The predator goes after the stray. The same is true when we are talking about the enemy and when we are talking about us. We are susceptible to things. We are susceptible when we stray. But when we are together, a three-corded strand is difficult to break. Do you understand the imagery on that? We are called together. Our purpose is to be together. We are better together. We are to worship together. And when we don't, we step away from our purpose and we put ourselves in danger. And we step away from that which is fulfilling.